Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome this evening's guest moderator from HitFix.com, Alan Sepinwall, and tonight's guests, Steven Moffat and Sue Virtue.
So the first thing I want to ask you is, do either of you remember the first Sherlock story you read and how old you were?
I can do it by rote. Would you like me to?
Please.
No, it's A Study in Scarlet was the very first Sherlock Holmes story I read. Because I read the Sherlock Holmes stories in order. Those people that can only watch television series in the right order. I was that anal when I was 8. So I preempted. Sue, tell them the shameful truth.
I hadn't read any of them.
Uh-oh.
Still haven't read that many of them. No, I did. I have read some now, and but actually, I only started reading them when we thought we might make them.
Okay,
It's good to have a non-geek, I think.
In fairness to Sue here, Mark and I are obviously, although we keep it tremendously secret, very geeky. And we need somebody to say, no, you've just gone into your own little special place. Make a proper television show. And that's what Sue does. So she stays away from the detail of the origin.
So was this something you had even pondered before you and Mark got to talking? Had you ever sort of entered your mind, I could do a TV version of Sherlock?
Yeah, most days, but I didn't think we didn't have the particular version or take until we, in talking to each other and admitting our love for Sherlock Holmes and discussing that, sort of haltingly further admitted that we really liked those Basil Rathbone, Nigel Bruce movies that were set in the 1940s. While they were clearly wrong and heretical in many serious ways, oh my God, they're so much more fun. And we kept saying, someday someone's going to do that again. And it's going to be a hit again, and we'll be really, really cross because we should have done it. And we just kept saying that for years, really, seriously, years, until I mentioned to Sue what we'd been talking about, and she immediately leapt at it, which was interesting because Sue, as we've covered, not being a Sherlock Holmes enthusiast, being instantly that interested was significant, I think.
But you did come back about 3 times, go, Mark and I have been talking about this series again. Somebody should do it. And I go, we could do it. Well, it did take a while, didn't it, to start it from us.
So were there certain aspects of the character that were easier or more difficult to translate to the 21st century?
The reason that we instantly got enthused about doing this, instantly in the sense of being 2 men and doing nothing, but realizing it would be a good idea if someone did it, is it translates very, very easily. You realize how little, if any, of Sherlock Holmes is anything to do with Victoriana. It's just instantly, even the fact that Dr. Watson could be invalided home from the same war, which we'd had the kindness to restart in Afghanistan. And 2 men looking for a flat share. Sherlock Holmes doesn't like, even when the telephone is invented, Sherlock Holmes doesn't like making phone calls. He likes sending telegrams. Telegrams have come back. They're called texts. To communicate with no personal interaction. Yowza, for Sherlock. So it just fitted at every point perfect, even to the fact that the idea of Dr. Watson keeping a journal for many years became like an anachronism. People stopped doing that. They've started doing it again in the computer age as blogs. So it all just fitted. It was very easy.
I don't think there was any problem, was there? I mean, there was the drugs thing. I think was the only thing that.
It wasn't so much.
Anyway.
I mean, the drugs thing has become. I mean, there was a period of Sherlock Holmes movies that became obsessed with the fact that there are about 4 or 5 occasions in the stories where he took cocaine, and they were early on. And I think at the point Doyle realizes kids are reading, he chucks it out, and that's become sort of central to the way Sherlock Holmes is portrayed. We realize that setting him in a modern time and saying he takes coke would just make him an advertising executive. And that's just not cool anymore. I mean, it makes him cool in the original stories because that was an exotic thing to do. You're just a git if you're doing that. Similarly, smoking. Sherlock Holmes would give up smoking if he lived in the modern day world because it'd be too ruddy and inconvenient. Right. So those things were difficult, but not very.
Yeah. Although it's a running gag in the second series where he's constantly sort of tempted to take up the habit again.
Yeah. Well, that's what we thought, is he'd have the nicotine patches. He'd be thinking, oh, I'd love to smoke. But he doesn't. He actually actively gives up. I think that's what a man like him would do now.
So you obviously started the series with A Study in Scarlet, which you turned into A Study in Pink. Beyond that, there's about 60 stories or so. How did you decide which ones I'm going to adapt now, which ones I'm going to adapt later, which ones I'm just going to mine for a little throwaway in joke here and there that the real aficionados will get?
Most of them can only be mined because most of them are too short. Most of them are about, 20 minutes of screen time. Scandal in Belgravia, which is on Sunday, the first 20 minutes are sort of a Scandal in Bohemia, and then it goes off into a different story. Mark's preference when it comes to adapting them is to take several stories. He took about 5 in The Great Game and jam them together. So we just take, the only thing that sort of, the two things that influence us are, obviously there are big items you have to cover. Everyone wanted to know how we were going to do Moriarty. Everyone wanted to know what we're going to do with the Hound. A smaller number of people, but a significant number wanted to know what would happen with Irene Adler, so we thought, let's do those. The other things that we cleave towards, I suppose, are the lesser-known bits, the really, really good bits of Doyle that no one ever talks about. Because there's quite a lot of it, quite a lot of those 60 stories that people just ignore, and it's really, really good fun to get into those.
So give me an example of something that people might not have known, but you were eager to use.
One of Mark's first favourites, one of the first things he wanted to do was that weird list in A Study in Scarlet of all the things that Sherlock Holmes doesn't know. And the idea of Sherlock Holmes having he compares his brain to an attic and he can't overstuff it. And now, of course, he now gets, because it's the modern times, a much better comparison of a hard drive that he doesn't want to overfill. So he was very, very keen on that. Aspects of the character that aren't really covered. They're always, because so many adapters of Sherlock Holmes have been so busy diagnosing him and saying he's a manic depressive, he's bipolar, he's some weird thing, they forget that none of that's in the original. In the original story, he's quite a happy man. Insane, you might think, but quite a happy man. And he likes his lifestyle. He gets a bit grumpy between cases. One of the things that we really picked up on, if you read the stories, is how often he laughs. He and Watson laugh all the time. They're having a good time in Baker Street. I think it's great fun. They go off and have adventures and solve cases, and so often they end up roaring with laughter. We wanted that element in.
For whatever grief Holmes puts Watson through, Watson does enjoy his company, and that's why he sticks around, yes?
Yeah.
You wouldn't normally get to Buckingham Palace without Sherlock, really, would you? I think it was a great time together.
No, it's a very, very equal friendship. Actually, they have a riot together. That's why they are together. That's why they're having more fun than they've ever had before in their lives. It's one of the things that Mark and I kept going on about. Let's not make it a tale of suffering, really, except towards the end. It is the story of a very, very happy friendship. They have a good time.
How would you compare sort of this relationship to the one that the Doctor has with his various companions? Does Holmes need Watson for the same sort of reasons?
Hello, the internet.
You knew it was
That
coming.
might be the most incendiary question I've ever been asked. It implies, the Doctor would take... Oh, dear God.
They're all very good friends, is what I'd say, and far too busy having adventures for anything untoward ever to happen. How different is the relationship? Actually, it is much more equal between Sherlock and Dr. Watson, because they're men of similar age, and although Sherlock Holmes doesn't quite realise it, oh my God, he needs Dr. Watson. He needs Dr. Watson more than Dr. Watson needs him. Yeah, and I think that's very obvious in the Scandal in Belgravia. You just see the size and the dedication of the support team around Sherlock Holmes to stop him having a meltdown. He thinks he's this monolith of reason. The rest of them think he's the monolith of reason today. Is he going to take drugs tonight? Look after him. So whereas the Doctor...
John's gradually training him, isn't he?
Yeah.
To be a human being.
Yes. Whereas the Doctor is, I suppose, more of this inspiring older man who appears in your life or something. I think it is probably quite different. Functionally, narratively, both characters lead you, I suppose, to the harder one to understand. Is that fair?
And
Yeah.
And safe.
I walked among the fire pits there.
well played.
Yeah.
One more comparison, which is just sort of the length of both a Sherlock episode and a Sherlock season, as compared to, you're doing only 3 90-minute movies, whereas you're doing a whole bunch of 1-hour Doctor adventures. Sort of, how does that compare for you?
It's two very different ways of making a show. Doctor Who, I always think, is about abundance. It's about giving people loads and loads. A sort of shocking amount of colour and adventure. It's the you sort of carpet bomb the country with Doctor Who. What a lovely comparison. Whereas Sherlock is clearly a surgical strike. What's a terrible way to compare my shows to? But with Sherlock, we try and concentrate like 13 episodes worth into 3 movies, and then make you wait for ages, absolutely ages, laughing every day, and until people are desperate for it to come back. Whereas I sort of feel with Doctor Who, we're sort of it's more like the puppy. It's running towards you all the time. It's always going to be there. It's huge and abundant and colourful.
So there's less taunting involved with Doctor Who.
I wouldn't say that. It's taunting of a different kind.
Okay. There's a line in one of the upcoming episodes. Inspector Lestrade refers to Holmes as CSI Baker Street, and that leads me to something I've wondered about doing a version of Holmes set in the 21st century, which is, what is popular culture, and specifically like mystery fiction, like in a world in which Sherlock Holmes never existed? Because characters like Gil Grissom from CSI are pretty blatantly, Holmes homages. Does Fox air House?
I've never really thought about it. I mean, in all honesty, I suppose it's very different. Detective series all feature very, very reasonable, dedicated people who work in teams, and there are no mavericks anywhere. And private detectives just don't exist. But yeah, I can't imagine. It must be very different. It must be a very different world where you can say, "Hello, my name is Sherlock Holmes," and people say, "Who?" So you have to put up with that. It's like James Bond being a secret agent who everybody knows his name. It's odd.
Now, you mentioned before people were looking forward to seeing your take on Moriarty and your take on Irene Adler. Moriarty is certainly not like the depictions I've seen before. How did you come up with this specific approach to the character?
Well, the problem with Moriarty, and he's by far our biggest departure, actually with Watson and Holmes and the others, we're pretty close, very close in fact. Moriarty, the problem is, Doyle invents perfectly, first time out, the supervillain, the best supervillain ever, and every supervillain after him, to this day, talks exactly like him. They're all courteous and suave and cold and always welcome you in and say, hello, and all that stuff. All of them do it. It's like they've all said, have you seen that guy Moriarty? Let's be like him. And the trouble is, and it's in the way Marlon Brando has taught mafia bosses how to behave. So we had to find a different version of the supervillain, because I kind of thought, and both of us thought, if we have Moriarty like that, he will seem like the biggest cliche ever, in the way that it feels as though Hamlet is full of quotes. The fact that he is, the original doesn't excuse you of that. Also, I thought organised crime was the great nightmare of the Victorian, but we've got used to it now. We practically rely on it. What's our great nightmare now? You're closer to the suicide bomber, someone who doesn't think like you at all, someone who does not prioritise their own survival, someone who is, as far as we can see, completely mad. How do you reason with that? So someone as bright as Sherlock Holmes, but completely insane, I think is our biggest nightmare. So that's how we got to that kind of Moriarty.
But I mean, then Andrew came in and he just blew us away with the portrayal. I mean, that was his mad sort of, almost Joker from Batman. Sort of,
No, it was actually, it's quite an interesting story, because we originally didn't end. The Great Game, Mark's The Great Game, didn't end with Moriarty at all. It ended quite differently, with Sherlock realising that guy he'd met earlier, Gay Jim as we called him, was in fact Moriarty.
And a man maybe in sunglasses, I think was the original idea.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah, exactly. I've forgotten the man in sunglasses. But then we realised we had to cast somebody as Gay Jim who could later be Mental Moriarty. In desperation, I think I wrote up a scene for them to play, just a scene full of really ridiculous lines like, I could burn the heart out of you, and all that. And I thought, if anyone can say this, they can play the part. And a lot of people...
Otherwise you say to people, no, it's going to be a great part, really, honestly, come in. And they just wouldn't come in, so that's why you wrote it, really, as a casting piece.
And then Andrew came in and burned the heart out of everybody. And we thought, well, that's brilliant, but we've got to put that scene in now. So Mark and I changed the ending so that we actually see Moriarty, and then, just for larks, ended on a cliffhanger. Certainly hope we don't do that again.
How did Mark come to play Mycroft? Was that his idea, your idea?
Well, it was an effort not to stop him playing all the parts. No. Okay, actually, do you know it was Steve Thompson's idea? Steve Thompson, who wrote The Blind Banker and The Wrecking Back Fall. We were talking very, very early on, and we were thinking maybe we'd get Mark Gatiss in as Moriarty, but we were slightly worried, Mark in particular, about is that exactly what people would be expecting him to do? He does actually talk like that. And then Steve Thompson said, I think it was, yes, Mark had been talking about Peter Mandelson, a political figure in Britain, and doing an impersonation of him rather brilliantly. And Steve said, you look a bit like Benedict. You've got the same colouring, the same sort of height, same sort of person. You should be Mycroft, and you should play it like that. So we thought, that's it. We'll make Mark Mycroft, a sinister Mycroft, like in The Private Life of Sherlock Holmes, as played by Christopher Lee. And then try and trick the audience into thinking that he is Moriarty, because everyone did just assume, well, Mark will be playing Moriarty, won't it? And probably as a vampire.
So we didn't credit him at all on the first show. I don't think he's got a credit, has he?
As co-creator, yes, but we actually kept it...
Yeah, but not as a Mycroft credit, we just
yes,
kept his name off totally.
All right, I believe it is time to open up the floor to you nice people. So if anyone has a question, please raise your hand.
We have microphones. Just raise your hand and we'll come to you.
Can you guys hear me?
Actually, right here, second row, leather jacket. Young lady here.
Hi. Thank you guys so much for coming by. I wanted to ask Sue a question. Obviously, tackling a show like this is very difficult regarding, filming schedules, because Benedict and Martin have other projects and husband wrangling. So I was just wondering whether you could speak as to some of the other challenges of producing the show and how they might have changed from doing the first series to the second.
Yeah, it has changed. It's a mammoth show now. I think it's not just the making of the show. I mean, actually, we have just worked out when we can shoot the next series. We have the advantage that everybody wants to do more, I think. So you just juggle them. Once you have everything in place, you can do that. But I think it's all the other stuff that goes with it. It's the financing of it. If we're going to do the merchandising of it, there's the books. And I think it's also trying to keep control over it to make sure it just doesn't go all over the place. I mean, there's quite a lot of stuff that we won't do, isn't there, with the show at the moment? We're not doing additional stories, but it's and also we shoot it partly in London and partly in Cardiff as well. So I think when we're shooting in London, we try and make sure that it really looks like London, and then when it's in Cardiff. But it works, and I think it mostly works because everybody really, really wants to work on the show, and they're very proud of it, so it helps that way. And we'll keep making them as long as everyone wants to do that.
Second row to your left.
Hi, my daughter's probably your biggest fan, and she asked me by text to ask you, Mr. Moffat, how do you come up with all of your brilliant ideas?
I give them to him.
I steal them from other people. What a flattering question. So thank you to your daughter. But the honest answer is I come up with ideas because I have to. And most days I don't come up with very good ideas, and I sit and stare at the wall and cry. But, really, I used to say that when I used to write comedy, I would sit and stare out the window until I laughed, and then I'd write it down. It's a bit like that. Think of something that's exciting. Just wait until it's exciting, then you write it down and then discover, oh, it's rubbish, and you score it out and you go and stare at the wall again until you think of something interesting. That's it.
Or you go into a graveyard and you think, oh, that's going to scare kids, isn't it? Which is what you do with...
Yeah. Yes.
Let's make kids scared of religious iconography. That'll be my day's work.
It's the dream.
Next question in the back row.
This is to Mark. And I will clarify that I got this off of gifts on Tumblr, and I have not seen the next season yet. But whose idea was it to have Sherlock tell Irene Adler that he doesn't beg for anybody and then have him beg for John in the next episode?
Did you say that question was for Mark? Because there's going to be a very long silence. But the man has remarkable powers. I think we should wait it out. He's coming through.
Sorry, it's been a long day. Steven!
Okay, that's fair enough. No. Whose idea was it to have him say he never begged in my life and begged for John's... do you know, I'm not sure that we ever considered that as a clash. I mean, I think what's going on with Sherlock and Irene at that moment might not be the literal truth, you know. And so I think he was just... you know, trying to deal with the fact that his brain had shut down for reasons he had not previously encountered. He's standing there saying, there's no blood up here, what the hell's going on? Help me! But, you know, I mean, of course he's begged. I think Sherlock begs all the time. He's trying to show off to a girl, don't trust us. Yeah.
To your left.
Hi, I'm a big fan of both Doctor Who and Sherlock, and I
can see that.
and I was just wondering, I know that the time overlapped when you were writing the Sherlock and Doctor Who, and what was that process like to write two such, you know, big, heavy shows, and did you ever feel conflicted? You know, how was that for you as a writer?
Hell. I think there was a time on the train, do you remember? When you phoned me with something about Sherlock and I was still doing Doctor Who and they were both filming and you know, they overlap all the time. And I was just so tired and I was just sitting there saying to Sue on the phone, I just want someone to be nice to me. Just anybody, could just someone randomly walk up to me and be nice. No, I was miserable. And it was before either show had gone out, so I was thinking, you know, this could be the eve of my humiliation and people aren't being nearly nice enough. So it's tough. It's lovely. Of course, it's a career highlight, and I know these are the best days. But oh my goodness, it's tough.
And then I pull rank and make him write Sherlock. So. But I mean, this week you've been writing Christmas.
Yeah, I've been writing. Well, I've been here publicising Sherlock. I've also been back in my room writing the Doctor Who Christmas special. Yes. You haven't seen what I've written.
Does one character or the other bring with it sort of a greater sense of dread that if you screw something up, you're going to get beaten up for it?
No, I pretty much accept that I get beaten up either way. No, I don't really think in those. So when I'm sitting writing, particularly the character stuff on the Doctor and on Sherlock, I really enjoy writing those characters, and I think I've got the hang of it. So I mean, I like it a lot. I don't really dread that part of it. Whenever someone comes on to Doctor Who in particular, I'm always saying to them, to any writer, any director, treat it like you own it. Treat it like it's yours. Treat it like you created it and no one else has any rights. Because that's the only way you can handle shows like that. If you go around saying, have I interfered with the terrible mythos of Doctor Who or Sherlock Holmes? Well, if you haven't, then you've done something wrong.
Fourth row to your right.
Hello. I have a two-part question. First, I don't want to spoil it for anyone, but there are a lot of theories online about a certain thing in the last episode. Have you read any of them, and have you seen any that are right in any way?
Nice try, Donna. Has anybody here not seen the second series?
He hasn't.
He hasn't. All right. Well, we're keeping it all fresh for him.
We have read some of them, and these are our faces.
Okay. My second part was to ask you if you were lying, but I guess that doesn't count.
I could be lying even when I say nothing. I have extra lying powers.
Third row to your left.
Just out of curiosity, did you ever see the Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock Holmes movies?
Yes, and I like them very much. I didn't. I saw the first one when it first came out, and I've only just recently caught up with the second one because we were showing Sherlock in Britain at the time, and I thought that's too much Sherlock Holmes in my brain. But I caught up with it really recently. I think they're terrific. I think they're really, really bold. They're much truer to the original than people generally appreciate. And I think in terms of the way they've reinvented Sherlock Holmes as a cinema action hero, as a Hollywood actioner, is really clever. I think it's really smart, and I do enjoy them very much. Have to say, though, because I always say this because I'm a bastard, that we always talk about them. They never talk about us. So we are the ones who are unafraid.
In fact, they came to our screening. Did we go to their premiere?
No, yeah, that's true. Okay, you got me there. But they didn't invite us, did they?
No, that's what I'm saying. They came to our screening.
Yes, they snuck into our screen. That's not fair. No, the producer came along.
Yeah,
He was
very
really,
nice.
really nice. Yeah.
Back row. Next question.
Hi there. You are so good with spoilers and being very tight-lipped. How do you approach that, and is that ever difficult for you to not spoil something for the people around you?
Really, the only way to keep a secret is to keep it. I mean, seriously. And sometimes I had this argument recently on Doctor Who. I was saying, it always has to be need to know. If you don't need to know something, you don't get told it, and that includes me. If there's something secret about Doctor Who that I don't need to know, I don't want it in my head, because I'll blurt it out as well. But it's really just basic storytelling. Don't do the end first. And spoilers in the end are exactly that. It's exciting for the moment. In the moment you hear it, it's exciting. And then that show, that night, just isn't as good. So we're not really taunting you. We're just trying to say, enjoy it properly. Enjoy the story in the right order. When I was a kid watching Doctor Who, I had no idea even that Tom Baker was going to wear a long scarf. It was a genuine surprise. That's much more fun, surely. That's it.
I think it's tougher, though, now with the internet to actually... And you're going out 5 months later than we did in the UK. It's getting a lot tougher to stay away from them, I think.
Everyone's got it except him. Which is,
To your left.
Hi. So I know this is for Steven. I know that you're part of like 2 insanely bonkers television series. What attracts you to projects like that? Like, is it just because it's insane and you know that'll make people go mad, or what's there about a project like that?
well, in the case of these 2 projects, they're just stories and characters I've loved all my life. I mean, just that, literally just that. I mean, you can't really approach any story from the point of view of what you think other people will think. You really can't. That sounds awfully selfish and introverted, but you just think, this is what I want to do. I would think this was cool. I would love this. If you start trying to think, I think other people would love this, you're being an arse, because you don't know. You do not know what other people will like. You only know what you will like. So everything I ever do on Sherlock and on Doctor Who is, forgive me, to entertain me, and in the hope that other people might like it too. Sometimes they do.
I think we do that as well as a company. We only make things that we would like to watch, and then I think you make them well. Otherwise, it doesn't really work. Again, you can't make stuff that you think somebody else might like.
Standing in the back to your left.
Hi, I have a question. After the series, a movement started happening within the fans of Sherlock, and it's called Believe in Sherlock. Did you ever happen to did you expect it to happen, or was it a surprise that people started doing it?
It was a complete surprise. It's very thrilling. We've seen Believe in Sherlock from all over the world, haven't we?
Yeah.
So that's so exciting. I don't know what people who've never heard of the show make of it. As they're going around saying, there really was a Sherlock there. Wow, that's extraordinary. But I like to think there's nobody who hasn't heard of the show. But no, that's thrilling, and it's also sort of creative. It's funny. What I like about it is also it's funny. People are having a laugh with it. So I think it's great.
But we love all those things. People send us things. We sent, we got dancing people from Russia and...
Yeah. Look, I've got...
Finland.
This is brilliant. This is my personal favourite thing. On my 50th birthday, yes, I really am that age, I got a bunch of very attractive Russian girls singing to me on YouTube, and I thought that was brilliant.
Is Russia far? No, sorry.
Then Benedict gets pictures of otters that look like him.
That's true. That was his equivalent. Bless him. We also got, what was it, people in Finland?
Yeah.
You see a sort of town centre or something, and someone shows Vatican cameos on the old duck. Which is brilliant. So that's fantastic.
And we have time for 2 more questions. First one right over there.
Last row, far left.
Hi. Presumably you've heard the Americans are going to be doing a Sherlock show. Did you hear? Elementary, it's going to be called. And they've made Watson a woman, Lucy Liu. Have you heard about this? I wondered what you thought.
Yes, we have. Yes, CBS. Funnily enough, they did ask us about a year ago if they could make our version, and we said no. That we weren't ready yet, and but we could keep talking in the future. And they didn't talk. They've just decided to make theirs anyway. So there you go. Yes, we do know about it.
Opposite side of the same row in the back.
Hi. I was just curious, with the end of the first season and certain things that happened, you seem to like your cliffhangers. And I was curious when writing them, when you're writing these cliffhangers, do you plan it out how you're going to resolve them already, or do you just kind of enjoy writing yourself into a corner and having faith that you're going to be able to work your way out of it?
No, actually, I do. We do have an answer. I mean, the only time we really did launch into a cliffhanger without a clue how we're going to get out of it, because I thought it was fairly easy, was the swimming pool scene. We really didn't know it was going to be the Bee Gees to the rescue. But that's confusing you. But this one, yes, absolutely, in every detail. Some of it shot already, and the various things I've done in Doctor Who, I've always had the answer. Yeah.
It would have been easier to have known the swimming pool first time round, because then we would have had to do it at the time, as opposed to going back a year and a half later, when they'd had a revamp. So we had to make it the same again.
All right, well, thank you all for coming. Thank you, Steven Moffat and Sue Vertue.